The woods know no mercy. In the winter of 1870, in the vastness of the Rockies or the plains of Nebraska, silence was not peace. Silence was a constant threat. Today, when we think of hunting, we think of sport, of trophies and regulations. But for the men and women who forged the American frontier, pulling the trigger was not a recreational act. It was the thin red line between seeing a new dawn or dying of starvation before the snow melted. This video is special, chosen directly by you, the paid members of the channel, in the last poll. You wanted the full story, and that is what I am going to give you. In this video, we will leave nothing out. We are going to dissect the entire history. We will talk about the complete catalog of wildlife, from the massive elk to the ubiquitous white-tailed deer. We will analyze the economy in detail, the brutal rise and fall of the fur trade, and the mathematics of hunger for a family in a log cabin. And above all, the iron. Starting with black powder and muzzleloaders, moving through the legendary Winchesters 1876 and 1886, until we reach the true kings of range, the single-shot rifles. Welcome to the frontier. The United States was a wild supermarket, but to do the shopping, you had to risk your skin. Let's divide the map by its owners. At the peak, the American moose and the elk. The elk is majestic, intelligent, and offers hundreds of pounds of premium lean meat, but it lives high up in rough terrain. Even higher, in the craggy peaks, the Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep. Hunting them was not just about marksmanship, it was mountaineering. Their meat was prized, but the caloric cost of risking your life for them did not make up for the effort. Sharing this terrain were the predators, the grizzly bear and the wolf. They were generally not hunted for hunger. Predator meat often carries parasites, like trichinosis. They were killed for two reasons: security, eliminating threats to livestock, and money, government bounties or the sale of their pelts. Facing a grizzly with a black powder rifle was a life-or-death gamble. Coming down from the peaks, we find the base of the food pyramid, the deer. Here we must make a vital distinction that every frontiersman knew. In the eastern woods and the Midwest, the white-tailed deer reigned supreme. A ghost. It moves through the thicket, fast and nervous. Hunting them required absolute stealth and close-range shots among the trees. But upon crossing the Missouri River, you were in the kingdom of the mule deer. Larger, with massive ears, and a different behavior. Instead of running blindly, they often stopped to look back. A fatal mistake against a long-range rifle. They were, without a doubt, the most reliable protein source for the average settler. On the plains, the ubiquitous bison and the swift antelope. The latter required long-distance shots, almost sniper-like. Also the coyote, an opportunist. It was not eaten except in extreme famine, but its pelt had value, and it was a pest to the chickens. In the desert south, the javelina, wild pigs, small but aggressive, traveling in packs. Dangerous at close range due to their tusks, but a vital source of fat in dry lands. We often ignore bird hunting, but it was essential for the daily diet. The wild turkey, extremely intelligent and hard to spot. The grouse, in the northern woods, so trusting you could sometimes kill it with a stick to save ammo. Pheasants and quail in the brush, and of course, the rabbit and the hare. They were the currency of protein. Easy to clean, quick to cook, and abundant. Without rabbits, many pioneers would never have survived their first winter. But there were men who did not hunt to eat. They hunted to get rich. Let's talk about the logistics of death on an industrial scale, and most importantly, how it all ended. First was the beaver. In the 1830s and 40s, a premium pelt fetched $5 or $6 at the rendezvous. Considering a good rifle cost $25, a successful trapper could get rich in one season, or freeze to death in the river. But this business taught us a cruel lesson. It didn't end just because the beaver ran out. It ended because of fashion. In Europe, the silk hat replaced the beaver felt. Overnight, the price plummeted. The great mountain men had to come down from the mountains and find other jobs. The market dictated survival. Years later, the industry moved to the plains, with the bison. Commercial hunting was a military operation, organized in teams or outfits. A typical outfit consisted of, number 1, the hunter, the boss. He used heavy Sharps or Remington rifles. His job was not to run, it was to lie down on a ridge and kill with rhythmic precision. Number 2, the skinners. 2 to 4 men. Their job was brutal. They followed the hunter and had to skin the animal before it cooled in the hide stuck to the muscle. They used Green River knives and sometimes horse teams to rip the hide off in one pull. Number 3, the wagon driver. He collected the heavy, bloody hides and sometimes handled the cooking. And 4, the reloader. Though often the hunter reloaded himself. Someone stayed at camp melting lead and reloading the hundreds of brass casings the hunter fired each day. The economy was staggering. A cowboy earned $30 a month, with a lot of luck. A skinner, doing dirty work, could make $50 or $60, and the hunter, if he was good, could make thousands of dollars in a season. A hide was worth $3. But this fever was the most destructive. By 1883 and 1884, hunters went out to the plains and found nothing. They had killed almost all of them. The industry didn't stop, it just changed products. When the pelts ran out, the bone collectors arrived. Entire wagon trains dedicated themselves to gathering the sun-bleached skeletons that covered the prairies. These bones were sent east to make fertilizer and fine china. It was the sad epilogue of America's largest fauna, turned into dust and manure. Furthermore, remember that most of these hunters did not use the meat. They left it to rot in the sun. Even the government and settlers were interested in wiping out the buffalo, as it was the main raw material for the Native American people. They subsisted entirely on the buffalo, from the hide, meat, bones, sinew, and everything they could use from the animal. Due to these slaughters, thousands of natives starved to death or were exiled to other territories. Besides hides, there was market meat. Professional hunters sent refrigerated train cars packed with natural ice, full of bison and elk loins, to restaurants in Chicago and New York, and tons of cheap meat to feed the crews of Chinese and Irish workers building the railroad. It was not sport, it was raw material supply. Let's step away from the business and go to the reality of the majority, the isolated farm. Here enters the mathematics of subsistence. Let's analyze the numbers. An adult male mule deer can provide about 60 to 70 pounds of clean, usable meat. A pioneer family of 5, parents and 3 children, doing extreme physical labor like chopping wood or plowing by hand, needs a massive caloric intake. That family easily consumes 3 to 4 pounds of meat a day, if it's their main energy source. This means a whole deer lasted at most 2 or 3 weeks, even a month if paired with vegetables and fruit. The problem was preservation. Killing a 1,000-pound bison in summer was useless if the meat rotted in 3 days. Therefore, It was cut into thin strips to make jerky, and smoked in chimneys or salted in brine barrels. But salt cost money. Conservation was vital. The role of the shotgun in subsistence. This is where the double-barreled shotgun shined. The deer was the jackpot, but the shotgun brought the daily dinner. A blast of birdshot into a flock of ducks or a group of quail, guaranteed protein for that day. It was the pot gun. Many farmers preferred the shotgun over the rifle because it forgave more errors when aiming at a moving rabbit. Missing a rifle shot meant going to bed hungry. The shotgun offered a margin of error. The children and the .22 caliber. We cannot forget the children. While the father worked the land, boys of 8, 10, or 12 years old were responsible for the trap lines and small game. Armed with cheap, single-shot .22 caliber rifles, they learned to shoot and brought in squirrels, rabbits, and raccoons. A box of 50 .22 rounds cost pennies, and the return on investment in meat was enormous. Those kids were essential providers for the household. And if as children they were capable of hitting squirrels or rabbits, surely as adults, with a larger caliber rifle, it wouldn't be very difficult to hit a mule deer or a larger animal. Finally, we reach the technical section. Let's analyze the tools that made all this possible, caliber by caliber. And to understand it, we must start at the beginning. We often forget that during much of the westward expansion, or even throughout the entire West, the metallic cartridge was a luxury, or simply did not exist. Here, the muzzleloader reigned supreme. Percussion rifles like the legendary Plains Hawken, or Old Military Springfield 1842, or Enfield 1853 muskets, left over from the Civil War and converted for hunting. They were slow, one shot a minute if you were fast. But they had an unbeatable logistical advantage: independence. In addition to their price, which was quite low, being military surplus or used rifles. If you had a Winchester and ran out of specific cartridges in the middle of Montana and had no way to reload, you had a useless club. But with a muzzleloader, you only needed lead, which you could recover from previous shots or buy in bulk at any hardware store, loose black powder, and percussion caps. For the poor trapper or isolated settler, the old muzzleloader remained the king of economic and logistical reliability, in addition to its immense power. Just like the sharps or other metallic cartridges, the muzzleloader offered great power and precision at the cost of a low rate of fire. Taking the technological leap, we find the most versatile tool, the double-barreled shotgun. In 10, 12, and 16 gauge, it was cheap. You could buy one for $5 or $8 in the Sears catalog. But I want to pause on its mechanics. Unlike the complex lever-action rifles, the break-action shotgun had almost no moving parts that could jam with mud or ice. Furthermore, black powder fouls heavily. In a rifled barrel, after 10 shots, the dirt makes it hard to reload. In the smooth bores of the shotgun, that mattered less. It was a weapon that worked dirty, abused, and rusted. Plus, much easier to clean. Absolute reliability. But its magic lay in the ammunition. On one hand, you had birdshot, fine pellets for birds and rabbits, small game. Then, a bit larger, you had buckshot, lead balls the size of a large pea, devastating at close range for defense or deer in thick woods. Then you had the slug, a lead sphere as large as the bore. At 40 yards, it hit with the force of a truck. With this, a farmer could drop a bear or a moose if it got close enough. And then, we had cut shells, a poor man's trick. If you only had small birdshot and a large animal appeared, you made a small cut around the shell with your pocket knife. And so, when fired, the entire shell exited as a solid projectile, acting like a bullet. Dangerous for you and the weapon, but it could get you out of a jam. Let's speak plainly about the Winchester Model 1873 and its little brothers, whether the .66 Yellow Boy, the Henry, or pistol-caliber Marlins. Hollywood has told us this was the gun that hunted the West. That is false. It was the gun that defended the West, but for hunting, it left much to be desired. Why? First, the price. It cost $40 or $50, a fortune. A farmer could buy 4 or 5 shotguns for that price. The power. It fired revolver bullets like the .44-40 or smaller cartridges. At 150 yards, the bullet dropped like a stone and barely had the energy to cleanly kill a large deer. And then, the capacity. Having 15 shots in the magazine is vital if you are attacked by 5 outlaws. But for hunting, the first shot is what counts. Or at most, a repetition of 2 or 3 shots. The animal isn't going to wait around for you to empty the magazine. The Winchester 73 was an urban combat and defense weapon, not a primary hunting tool. The true lever-action rifles for hunting arrived later. Hunters demanded real power. And Winchester responded with 2 legendary models that eclipsed competitors like the scarce Marlin 1881. First, the Winchester Model 1876. It was Theodore Roosevelt's favorite rifle in his Dakota days. It was basically an oversized 1873, built to fire powerful cartridges like the .45-60 and .45-75. Heavy, large, but capable of dropping a moose or a bear. But mechanical perfection arrived with the Winchester Model 1886, designed by the genius John Moses Browning. Unlike the 76, which used a somewhat weak toggle link system, the 86 used vertical locking blocks of solid steel. It was so strong, it could fire anything from the .45 to .70 government to the brutal .50 to .110 express. This was the definitive lever-action rifle for big game. Powerful as a buffalo, fast as lightning. But again, it was an expensive weapon reserved for professionals and wealthy hunters. Within the Winchester world, there was a vital subcategory, the trapper models. These were not different rifles, but custom versions of standard models like the 1873 or the 1892, but with factory-cut barrels down to 14, 15, or even 12 inches. Why would you want such a short rifle that loses precision? In comparison, standard Winchester models were 24 inches, almost double. However, as we have said before, they were not weapons made exclusively for hunting. And now we will tell you why these rifles, which were practically the same but with shorter barrels, were so useful. First, they held less ammunition. As we already said, you didn't need that much ammo capacity. Plus, they gained in lightness. Walking 20 miles a day checking traps with a long rifle is exhausting. The trapper weighed much less. Then we have maneuverability. In dense brush or on horseback, a long barrel gets snagged. The trapper was compact. And finally, its main function was the finishing shot, the coup de grace. When you found a live wolf or mountain lion in a trap, you needed a weapon to kill it at point-blank range without risking a bite, without wasting a large, unnecessary cartridge at that distance. A trapper version in .32-20 or .44-40 was the surgical tool for this dirty work, and sufficiently powerful for distances of 5 to 10 meters, even on large animals. But if we talk about pure lethal efficiency, the undisputed kings of the era didn't have a lever. They were the single-shot rifles, the Sharps 1874 and the Remington rolling block. With their massive barrels of even 30 or 34 inches, they were cheaper than a Winchester 1886, mechanically indestructible, and kings of ballistics. The philosophy was one shot, one kill. These rifles forced the hunter to be an expert marksman. You couldn't afford to miss and spray bullets. Every shot was a calculated decision, capable of launching 500-grain bullets at 800 yards. They were the pocket artillery of the frontier. Every professional bison hunter trusted his livelihood to a single shot from a large caliber, like the .45-70, the .45-90, or the .50-90, among many others, over any repeater. The revolver was dead weight for many. It cost the same as a rifle, but was only good to 15 meters. If the budget was tight, it stayed in the store. It was a personal defense weapon against humans, not a hunting tool. Some hunters might carry it to defend themselves from other humans, or for close-range defense against an animal. However, it was not very common or useful. To close the technical section, a mention of the future. Around 1895, when the frontier was almost closed, smokeless powder arrived. Cartridges like the mythical .30-30 Winchester, small, fast, and flat trajectory bullets, are excellent and today are the standard. But they arrived late to the party. The great epic of the West, the extinction of the bison and the Indian Wars, were fought and hunted under a cloud of white smoke and the smell of sulfur. Hunting in the West was an epic of blood, mechanics, and survival. It was an era of brutal excess, where we almost extinguished the bison, but also an era of extreme self-sufficiency, where a 10-year-old boy contributed to the family table with his aim and an old shotgun. These weapons, from the little .22 through the old muzzleloader, the powerful single shots, and the legendary Winchester 1886, forged the character of a nation. Nature forgave a mistake. It gave you another chance the next day. But hunger never forgave. This has been the most complete analysis we have ever done. If you want to see how these weapons perform today, or in a particular and specific way, leave it in the comments. I am Logan. See you on the frontier. Join the channel members to access the complete ballistic tables of all calibers mentioned today, real historical prices from 1880, and to vote in the monthly polls for next month's video.